She buried her father on a Tuesday. Her husband stood 3 feet away, holding his own umbrella. Wednesday morning, he filed for divorce, told her she'd be fine, that he'd support the baby, then married someone else by Friday. What he didn't know, what he never thought of, was that the janitor who raised her was a billionaire in hiding. And when he walked into that gala with his new wife, he walked into the mistake that would haunt him forever. Before we dive in, if you've ever been underestimated because you stayed quiet, drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see how far loyalty and patience still matter in this world. Because what happens next will test everything you believe about both. The machines breathed for him because he couldn't anymore. Maya pressed her palm against the hospital bed rail, knuckles white, listening to rhythms that weren't natural. The ventilator hissed. The monitor beeped. The fluorescent lights hummed like they were bored. Her father's chest rose and fell, but it wasn't him doing it. "Daddy," she whispered, leaning close enough to smell the antiseptic on his skin. "I need you to fight. Just one more time." His hand was warm in hers, still calloused from decades of work, still strong enough to hold on, but not strong enough to wake up. The doctor had used words like declining and unresponsive, words that felt too polite for what was actually happening. Her father was dying, and no amount of soft language could change that. She'd been there for 48 hours straight. No sleep, no real food, just coffee that tasted like regret and waiting room chairs that made her back ache. Marcus had texted twice, once to ask if she needed anything, once to say he'd be late. She didn't respond to either. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars honked. People laughed. Life continued like it didn't know hers was ending. But in that room, time felt different. Slower. Heavier. Like gravity had decided to press down on her chest and test how much weight she could carry before breaking. Her father had raised her alone. No help. No complaints. Just steady, quiet love that showed up every single day. When she was 7, he taught her how to tie her shoes. When she was 12, he taught her how to change a tire. When she was 16, he taught her that people who talk the loudest usually have the least to say. And when she turned 23 and told him she was getting married, he didn't give his blessing right away. He waited, studied Marcus across the dinner table, asked questions that felt too sharp at the time. Then he hugged her and said, "I trust you to know your own heart." Not, "I trust him. I trust you." She didn't understand the difference then. She was starting to now. The nurse came in quietly, checking monitors, adjusting tubes. She didn't make eye contact. She'd seen this enough times to know how it ended. Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Her father's fingers twitched. She sat up fast, heart pounding. "Dad!" His lips moved. Barely. No sound came out, but she leaned in close, desperate to hear anything. He managed 3 words. Slow. Strained. Final. "Go to bank." Then the monitors screamed, and nurses flooded the room, and Maya was pushed back into the hallway, where she couldn't do anything but stand there and wait for someone to tell her what she already knew. Her father was gone, and she had no idea what he meant. Growing up, Maya thought everyone's dad worked 2 jobs. Hers did. Janitor at the elementary school during the day. Maintenance at the church 3 nights a week. Weekends spent fixing things for neighbors who couldn't afford to pay him but did anyway, with casseroles, gratitude, and respect. He never seemed tired, never seemed angry. He just worked, came home, made dinner, and asked about her day like it mattered more than anything else in the world. Their apartment was small. 1 bedroom. She slept in it. He took the couch for 16 years and never once made her feel guilty about it. They didn't have much, but what they had was clean, organized, intentional. Her father folded his uniforms with the same care other men folded suits. He polished his work boots every Sunday night. He kept a calendar on the fridge with her school events circled in red ink. Never missed a single one. Other kids had parents who showed up in business clothes, expensive watches, new cars. Her father showed up in his janitorial uniform, still smelling faintly of floor cleaner, sitting in the back row so he wouldn't embarrass her. She was never embarrassed. Not once. Because while other parents checked their phones during recitals, her father watched her like she was the only person in the room. He taught her things that didn't make sense for a janitor to know. How to read a contract. How to recognize when someone was lying by watching their hands, not their face. How to walk into a room and assess who held real power versus who just wanted people to think they did. Money talks, baby girl, he'd say while washing dishes. But character whispers. And the people worth knowing are the ones who listen for the whisper. She didn't understand half of what he said back then, but she remembered all of it. When she got accepted to college, he cried. Not sad tears, proud ones. The kind that made his whole face soften. You're gonna do things I never could, he told her. You did everything, she said back. He shook his head. No, I chose something different. There's a difference. She didn't ask what he meant. She wishes now that she had. Because looking back, there were moments that didn't add up. The way he spoke, the books he read, the way people at the bank knew his name without him having to introduce himself. Her father wasn't just a janitor. He was a janitor on purpose. And she was about to find out why. It rained the day they buried him. Not the soft kind of rain that feels like sadness. The aggressive kind. The kind that soaks through coats and turns dirt into mud and makes you wonder if the sky is personally offended. Maya stood at the graveside, 6 months pregnant. Marcus stood beside her, with his own umbrella. She noticed that immediately, not because she expected him to be romantic about it, but because when the wind yanked her sideways and rain hit her face, he didn't move, didn't adjust, didn't offer. He just stood there, dry, scrolling through his phone. People came up to her one by one, hugged her, said things that were supposed to help, but didn't. He's in a better place. At least he's not suffering. God needed another angel. She nodded. Thanked them. Let them think their words mattered. But what she really wanted to say was, he's not in a better place. The better place was here, with me, watching me become a mother, meeting his grandchild, staying. Marcus checked his watch twice during the service. When the pastor asked if anyone wanted to share memories, Marcus stayed silent. Maya talked about her father's hands, how they were never still, always fixing, always building, always steady when hers shook. Her voice cracked halfway through, and she had to stop. Marcus didn't reach for her. When the casket was lowered, she stepped forward to drop a rose. Her heels sank into the mud. She stumbled. An older woman, someone from the church, caught her elbow, steadied her, whispered, "I've got you, honey." Marcus didn't notice. After the burial, people gathered at the church for food. Sandwiches no one was hungry for. Coffee that went cold in paper cups. Conversations that felt too loud for a day like this. Maya sat in the corner, exhausted, rubbing her stomach where the baby had started kicking more frequently. Like even in the womb, it could sense something was wrong. Marcus found her 20 minutes later. "I need to head out," he said. Not asked. Announced. She looked up at him, confused. "Now, about a work thing. I told you about it last week." She hadn't remembered. Maybe he did tell her. Maybe grief had erased it. Either way, it didn't matter. "Okay," she said quietly. He kissed the top of her head. Quick. Routine. Empty. "I'll see you tonight." He didn't. By 10 p.m., she was alone in their apartment, still wearing her funeral clothes, staring at her phone. No text, no call, no explanation, just silence, and the sharp, cold realization that she'd just buried the only man who'd ever actually shown up for her. Her husband had already left long before the funeral. She just hadn't wanted to admit it until now. She found out on Instagram. Not from him, not from a conversation, not even from a rumor, from a tagged photo. It was close to midnight. She'd finally gotten out of her dress, washed her face, climbed into bed. Her body ached. Her mind wouldn't stop. She opened her phone out of habit, scrolling, distracting herself, trying not to think about the fact that her father was gone and her husband still wasn't home. Then she saw it. Marcus, sitting at a restaurant she recognized. Expensive, dim lighting, candles on the table, across from a woman she didn't know. Not a work colleague, not a client, someone young, polished, the kind of pretty that came with effort and cost. She was leaning forward, laughing at something he'd said. He was leaning back, relaxed, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at Maya in months. The caption said, "New beginnings, clinking glasses sparkles." Posted 1 hour ago. Maya stared at the screen until her vision blurred. She didn't cry right away. She just sat there, holding her phone, feeling her heartbeat in her throat. Her father had been in the ground for less than 12 hours, and her husband was out celebrating new beginnings. She clicked on the woman's profile. Isabel Chun, marketing executive, 73,000 followers. Every photo looked like an ad for a life Maya would never have. She scrolled back through Marcus's recent activity. Likes on Isabel's post going back 3 months. Comments that were too friendly. A pattern she'd been too trusting or too tired to notice. Her hands started shaking. Not from sadness. From something sharper. Something that felt like her body finally catching up to what her mind had been avoiding. She got up, walked to the bathroom, gripped the sink, looked at herself in the mirror. Pregnant, exhausted, alone, and married to a man who couldn't even wait a full day after her father's funeral to take another woman out to dinner. She didn't throw anything, didn't scream, didn't call him. She just stood there, breathing slowly, feeling the baby shift inside her. Then she went back to bed, set her phone on the nightstand, and waited. Marcus came home at 2:14 a.m. She heard the door, the keys on the counter, his footsteps in the hallway. He didn't check on her. He went straight to the guest room. And that's when Maya knew. It was already over. She just didn't know yet how much worse it was about to get. He waited until morning. Not because he cared about timing, but because cowards need daylight to do their damage. Maya was in the kitchen, staring at coffee she hadn't drunk when Marcus walked in. He looked rested, showered, put together, like he'd been rehearsing. "We need to talk," he said. She didn't respond, just watched him, waiting. He sat across from her, folded his hands on the table like this was a business meeting. "I think we both know this isn't working," he started. Her stomach dropped, but her face stayed still. "I've been unhappy for a while, and I think you have too. We just didn't want to admit it." She almost laughed. "We," as if this was mutual, as if she'd been the one pulling away. "I want a divorce," he said. Flat, final, no hesitation, no remorse. She felt the baby kick. Hard, like even it knew something was wrong. "You're serious," she said quietly. "I am. My father died 2 days ago. I know. I'm sorry about that. But that doesn't change where we are. Where we are. Like their marriage was a location they'd both wandered into by accident. I'll support the baby," he continued, like he was negotiating terms. "Financially. I'm not walking away from that responsibility. But you and me, we're done." She stared at him, really looked at him. This was the man she'd trusted, the man she'd chosen, the man who'd promised her forever in front of everyone who mattered. And now he was sitting here, calm as anything, dismantling her life like it was paperwork. "I've already talked to a lawyer," he added. "I'll have everything drawn up by the end of the week. You won't have to do much. Just sign. Just sign," she repeated. "Yeah, I'm trying to make this easy for you." Easy. She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to ask him how he could do this now, like this, without even pretending to feel bad about it. But she didn't, because in that moment, something her father used to say came back to her. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Marcus had just shown her, and she believed him. "Okay," she said. He blinked, surprised, like he'd expected a fight. "Okay. Yeah, if that's what you want, then okay." He stood up, relieved. "I think this is the right thing. For both of us." She didn't respond. He left the room, left the apartment, left her sitting there, 6 months pregnant, alone. And that's when she remembered her father's last words. "Go to the bank." She grabbed her coat and walked out the door. If you think walking away when someone's at their lowest is justified, keep watching. Because what happens next will make you question everything you believe about loyalty. The bank didn't feel like a bank. It felt like a place where secrets went await. Maya walked through the lobby, past marble columns and chandeliers that seemed too expensive for a place that handled regular people's money. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. She felt out of place, underdressed, unprepared. A woman in a tailored suit approached her before she even reached the desk. "Ms. Richardson?" Maya stopped. "Yes. We've been expecting you. Please follow me." She hadn't called ahead, hadn't made an appointment, but somehow they knew. They walked past the main counter, through a secure door that required a key card, down a hallway that felt quieter than it should, and into a private room with no windows. A man in his 60s stood when she entered. Gray hair, kind eyes, the kind of calm that comes from seeing everything twice. "Ms. Richardson," he said gently. "I'm Victor Kane. I managed your father's accounts for 32 years. I'm so sorry for your loss." She nodded, throat tight. "He told me to come here." Right before she couldn't finish. Victor gestured to a chair. "He knew you would. He made very specific arrangements." He placed a small metal box on the table between them. Safety deposit box. Number 1247 etched into the surface. "This requires 2 keys, Victor explained, producing one from his jacket. "Yours should have been in his personal effects." Maya reached in her bag, found the envelope the hospital had given her. Inside, her father's wedding ring, his watch, and a small brass key she hadn't understood until now. She handed it to Victor. He inserted both keys, turned them simultaneously. The lock clicked. Victor lifted the lid, then stepped back. "I'll give you privacy. Take as much time as you need." He left the room, closed the door. Maya stared at the box. Inside, a stack of documents held together with a black clip. A sealed envelope with her name written in her father's handwriting. And beneath it all, something that made her breath catch. Photographs. Old ones. Her father, young, maybe 25, standing in front of a mansion, wearing a suit that cost more than anything she'd ever seen him wear in her entire life. Surrounded by people who looked like they owned the world. She flipped to the next photo. A newspaper clipping. Faded, but readable. "Hartwell heir vanishes after family dispute." She read the date. 34 years ago. The name beneath the headline. James Hartwell III. She looked at the photo again. That was her father, but the name was wrong. Her hands shook as she reached for the documents. The first page was a legal trust, established 28 years ago. Updated 3 weeks before her father died. Beneficiary, Maya Richardson. Trustee, Victor Kane. She skimmed through terms she didn't fully understand. Words like irrevocable and protected interest and spousal exclusion clause. Then she saw a number at the bottom of the 3rd page. She read it twice, then a 3rd time, because it couldn't be real. Her father, the man who scrubbed floors for 35 years, had left her something that didn't make sense. Not a house, not savings, an empire. She opened the envelope with shaking hands. The letter inside was written on plain paper. No logo, no letterhead, just her father's careful handwriting, slightly slanted to the right, the way it always was when he took his time. Baby girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I couldn't tell you myself. But some truths are easier to understand after you've lived long enough to see why they matter. My name wasn't always James Richardson. I was born James Hartwell III, heir to a family that valued legacy over love, control over character. My father built an empire. My grandfather expanded it, and I was expected to continue it. No questions, no deviations, no choices of my own. When I was 26, I met your mother. She worked at a bookstore near campus. She wore her hair in a braid and read poetry during her lunch breaks. She made me laugh in a way I didn't know I needed. She didn't care about my last name, didn't care about the money. She cared about who I was when no one else was watching. I wanted to marry her. My family said no. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because she wasn't part of their plan. They wanted alliances, mergers, arrangements that looked good in business journals. So they gave me a choice, the fortune or the future I wanted. I chose her, and they made sure I paid for it. Maya stopped reading, wiped her eyes, kept going. They cut me off, publicly disowned me, erased me from every family record like I'd never existed. I changed my name, found work that didn't require references or connections, started over with nothing but the woman I loved and the belief that a good life doesn't require money. It requires meaning. Your mother and I had 6 years together before she died, bringing you into this world. And those 6 years were the richest I've ever lived. But here's the part they didn't know. The part one made sure of before I walked away. I didn't abandon the fortune. I restructured it, hid it inside legal protections so complex that even they couldn't touch it. Handed control to someone I trusted completely. And waited, not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew one day you'd need it. The money grew, quietly, strategically, managed by people who understood that real wealth isn't about spending. It's about security, options, the ability to protect yourself from people who only value you when they think they can use you. I needed you to grow up without it, to know who you were before you knew what you had, to choose love for the right reasons, to build character when no one was watching. And now that you know the truth, I need you to understand something. This isn't about becoming someone different. It's about having the resources to stay exactly who you are, without compromise, without fear, without needing anyone's permission. Maya set the letter down. Her father hadn't been hiding from wealth. He'd been protecting her from it, until the moment she needed it most. The rest of the documents laid it out in language that felt both cold and deliberate. Irrevocable trust agreement. Established 6 months after her father changed his name. Updated every 5 years. Most recently revised 3 weeks before his death. Right after he got the diagnosis that told him time was running out. Maya read through it slowly, forcing herself to understand. The trust wasn't just money sitting in an account. It was a structure, a fortress built from legal language and long-term strategy. Every asset was held inside entities that couldn't be touched by lawsuits, divorce settlements, or creditors. Her name wasn't on anything public. No tax records. No property filings. Nothing that could be traced. Victor Kane, the man who'd opened the box, was listed as the trustee. He had full authority to manage, invest, and protect everything. But he couldn't spend $1 without her written consent once she turned 25. She turned 25 3 months ago. One section made her pause. Spousal exclusion clause. She read it twice, trying to parse the legal wording. Then she understood. If she got married, her spouse had zero claim. Not to the principal, not to the income, not to anything. The trust was hers alone, protected by design from anyone who might try to access it through her. Her father had written it that way on purpose, because he knew, not specifically about Marcus, but about the possibility of someone like him. Someone who'd show up with charm and promises, then disappear the moment things got hard. The trust could distribute funds to her at any time, but those funds, once received, became hers individually, separate property under state law. Marcus couldn't touch them, not in a divorce, not ever. Her father had seen this coming, not the details, but the pattern, and he'd spent 30 years making sure no one could hurt her the way his family had tried to hurt him. There were other provisions too, clauses about her future children, protections in case she became incapacitated, instructions on how the wealth should be used, if she chose to use it all. One phrase appeared over and over throughout the document. Beneficiary maintains sole and absolute discretion. Translation: it was hers to do with as she wanted. No one could tell her how to spend it, invest it, or give it away. And no one even had to know it existed. She thought about Marcus, about the divorce papers he'd promised by the end of the week, about how he'd framed it as doing her a favor. He had no idea who her father really was. No idea what she'd just inherited. No idea that the woman he was walking away from had more power in one afternoon than he'd accumulate in his entire life. The question wasn't whether she had the resources to fight back. The question was whether she wanted to. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Real power doesn't announce itself. It waits. So she'd wait. She picked up the letter again. There were 2 more pages. Now that you understand what you have, I need you to understand something more important. What you are. This money doesn't define you. It never will. You were shaped by different things, by values, by sacrifice, by watching what happens when someone chooses love over legacy. I didn't raise you in poverty to punish you. I raised you in simplicity to teach you. You know what it feels like to work for something, to wait, to go without, to make choices based on what matters instead of what's easy. Most people born into wealth never learn that. They confuse resources with character. They think money makes them powerful, when really it just makes them loud. You're different. You know that strength isn't about what you have. It's about what you do when you have nothing. And now that you have everything, I need you to remember that lesson. Because here's what's going to happen. People will find out eventually. Not right away, but someday. And when they do, you'll see who they really are. The ones who stayed when you had nothing will stay when you have everything. The ones who left will try to come back. And the ones who underestimated you will suddenly want to reconsider. Let them. Not because you owe them anything, but because watching people reveal themselves is one of the most valuable educations you'll ever receive. Some people will be angry that you didn't tell them sooner. Let them be angry. You don't owe anyone access to your resources or explanations for your privacy. Some people will assume you'll change, become arrogant, reckless, or entitled. Prove them wrong by staying exactly who you are. And some people will underestimate you completely. They'll think quiet means weak. They'll mistake kindness for stupidity. They'll believe that because you don't show off, you don't have anything worth showing. Those are the dangerous ones. Not because they'll hurt you financially, you're protected from that now, but because they'll test your character, and how you respond will determine what kind of person you become. So here's my real inheritance. Patience. The ability to sit with discomfort and not react. To let people think what they want while you build something they can't touch. To stay quiet when everyone expects you to scream. Revenge is easy. Any fool with resources can destroy someone. But discipline, restraint, choosing not to use power, even when you have it, that's rare. That's legacy. I love you, baby girl. I always have. I always will. You're gonna be just fine. Dad. Maya folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope. She didn't cry, didn't rage, didn't call Marcus and tell him he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. She just sat there, hands resting on her stomach, feeling her daughter move beneath her ribs, and decided her father was right. Some battles aren't worth fighting, because the people who deserve to lose don't need your help doing it. They'll destroy themselves just fine. Victor returned 20 minutes later. He knocked softly before entering, giving her space to compose herself. "Do you have questions?" he asked gently. "Just one," Maya said. "How much?" He sat across from her, pulled out a single sheet of paper with a breakdown she could actually understand. Stocks, bonds, real estate holdings, private equity, international investments diversified across 12 countries. Assets acquired carefully over 34 years. Managed quietly, never flashy, never reckless. Total valuation as of last quarter, $5.2 billion. The number sat on the page like a fact that refused to make sense. She stared at it, read again, tried to connect it to the man who'd raised her in a one-bedroom apartment and packed her lunches in reused grocery bags. "That's not possible," she whispered. "It's conservative," Victor replied. "Your father refused high-risk investments. He prioritized stability over growth. If he'd been more aggressive, this number would be significantly higher." She felt lightheaded. "What do I do with it?" Victor smiled. Sad but warm. "Whatever you want. That's the point. You can live off the interest and never touch the principal. You could donate all of it tomorrow. You can pretend it doesn't exist. It's yours completely. Does anyone else know?" "Just me. And now you." Your father made sure of that. She thought about Marcus, about the divorce he was already planning, about how he'd offered to support the baby like he was doing her a favor. He had no idea, and she wasn't going to tell him. "I want to keep it quiet," she said firmly. "No one needs to know." Victor nodded. "That's wise. When you're ready, we'll set up distributions. Until then, everything stays exactly as it is." She stood, shook his hand, walked out of the bank the same way she'd walked in, alone, uncertain, grieving. But different, because now she knew something Marcus didn't. The woman he'd left behind wasn't broken. She was protected, and patience, as her father had taught her, was the most dangerous weapon a person could carry. 3 weeks later, the courthouse photos went live. Marcus and Isabel, married, fast, public, smiling like they'd won something. The comments section filled immediately. "Wow, that was quick. Didn't his wife just lose her dad?" Some people have no shame. Maya saw the photos, felt the sting, but didn't respond. She just kept going. Doctor's appointments, preparing the nursery, reading her father's letter over and over until she'd memorized every word. And when people asked how she was doing, she smiled and said the same thing every time. I'm fine. Really? Because she was. Not because the betrayal didn't hurt, but because she'd learned something Marcus never would. Real power doesn't need an audience. It just waits. Notice how power stays quiet until it's needed. Most people announce their strength the second they get it. But the ones who've earned it, they know better. Marcus didn't waste time. The divorce was finalized in 43 days. The remarriage happened 12 days after that. Maya signed every paper without argument. Didn't ask for alimony. Didn't fight for assets they didn't have. She took what was hers, which, legally, was almost nothing, and let him walk away thinking he'd handled things maturely. He posted about it once. A carefully worded statement about moving forward with grace and choosing happiness. Comments flooded in. Half supportive, half disgusted. Good for you, man. Life's too short. You couldn't wait 6 months? Her dad literally just died. This is why people don't trust marriage anymore. Isabel posted too. A photo of her hand wearing a new ring. Caption, when you know, you know. The internet had opinions. Strong ones. Maya became a story people told at dinner parties. The pregnant woman whose husband left her right after her father's funeral. Sympathetic. Tragic. Slightly pathetic. She heard about it secondhand. Friends who didn't know what to say. Acquaintances who sent awkward texts. Strangers online who debated whether Marcus was a villain or just honest about his feelings. She didn't correct anyone. Didn't defend herself. Didn't explain that she was fine. Better than fine, actually. She just kept her head down and waited. Because her father had taught her something most people never learn. Public opinion is temporary, but character is permanent. And right now, Marcus was showing everyone exactly who he was. She didn't need to say a word. By month 7 of her pregnancy, the noise had mostly died down. People moved on to newer scandals. Fresher drama. Someone else's messy divorce. Maya spent her days preparing. Nursery furniture. Baby clothes. Reading books about childbirth that terrified and reassured her in equal measure. Victor called once a week, checking in, making sure she had everything she needed. She always said yes, even when the answer was more complicated than that. She wasn't struggling financially. Victor had set up a modest monthly distribution that covered rent, groceries, and medical bills without raising questions. But she was struggling emotionally, not because of Marcus, because of his silence. Her father was gone, her husband was gone, and the only person who would have understood what she was going through was a man she'd never meet. The version of her father who'd made the same impossible choice 30 years earlier. Then, on a Tuesday in late September, something arrived. A cream-colored envelope. Heavy cardstock. Her name written in elegant script. No return address. She opened it carefully. Inside, an invitation. You are cordially invited to the inaugural event of the Richardson Hartwell Foundation. Her breath caught. She read it again. Richardson Hartwell. Her father's real name. And hers. The event was scheduled for October 14th. Black tie. Private venue. Limited guests. At the bottom, in smaller print, your presence is requested as the foundation's primary honoree. She had no idea what this was. Victor hadn't mentioned a foundation. Her father's letter hadn't mentioned one either. She pulled out her phone, called Victor. He answered on the second ring. You got the invitation, he said. Not a question. What is this? Your father's final project. He spent 2 years planning it before he got sick. I've been executing it since his death. It's time. Time for what? Victor paused. Then, gently, time for people to understand who you really are. Her heart pounded. I didn't agree to this. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. But the event is happening, and the guest list has already been finalized. Who's on it? Another pause. Everyone who matters, including Marcus. The announcement went live 3 days later. A press release. Professional. Polished. Distributed to local media and nonprofit networks across the state. Richardson Hartwell Foundation launches with $50 million endowment. Focused on education access, workforce development, and support for single-parent households. The newly established Richardson Hartwell Foundation will host its inaugural fundraising event next month. The foundation honors the legacy of James Richardson, who spent over 3 decades serving his community in quiet, meaningful ways. The article included a photo of her father, not in his janitorial uniform, but from decades earlier, standing in a suit, looking like someone who belonged in boardrooms. People who'd known him were confused. Wait, that's the guy from the elementary school. I didn't know he had money. Who's funding this? The press release didn't say. It listed Victor Kane as the executive director, mentioned a board of advisors with names no one local recognized, and referenced an anonymous founding donor whose gift had made the entire initiative possible. The community responded cautiously, curious but skeptical. $50 million didn't just appear. And James Richardson, the man who'd mopped floors and fixed leaky faucets, didn't seem like someone who'd have access to that kind of wealth. Rumors started circulating. Some thought it was a scam. Some thought it was funded by a celebrity or a politician using her father's name. Others thought Maya had somehow gotten a settlement for Marcus and was using it to rehab her image. No one guessed the truth, because the truth was too strange to believe. Maya watched it all unfold from a distance. She didn't comment, didn't clarify, didn't engage with the speculation. Victor handled everything. Press inquiries, event logistics, vendor coordination. All she had to do was show up. But the guest list haunted her. Victor had sent it over via encrypted email. 200 names. Donors. Community leaders. Local politicians. People her father had worked with over the years. And near the bottom, Marcus Chun plus guest. Her stomach turned. Why is he invited? She asked Victor over the phone. Your father requested it specifically. What? He left instructions. Exact names. Marcus was one of them. That doesn't make sense. Dad died before Marcus filed for divorce. Your father was perceptive, Victor said carefully. He saw things coming before they happened. She sat with that. Tried to process it. Her father had known. Maybe not the details, but the possibility, and he'd made sure Marcus would be in the room the night everything came to light. Not for revenge, but for education. I don't know if I can do this, Maya admitted. You don't have to, Victor reassured her. But if you don't, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you had. She thought about her father's letter, about patience, about letting people reveal themselves. He'll bring Isabel, she said quietly. Probably. People will talk. They already are. She exhaled slowly, felt the baby shift inside her, placed a hand on her stomach. Okay, she said finally. I'll be there. Good, Victor replied. Because this isn't about him. It's about you. And it's time people understood the difference. The venue was stunning. An old estate converted into an event space. Chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. Floors so polished they reflected the ceiling. Tables set with linens that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Maya arrived 30 minutes before the official start time. Victor met her at a side entrance. Took one look at her and smiled. You look perfect, he said. She'd chosen carefully. Emerald green dress. Empire waist to accommodate her now very visible pregnancy. Hair pulled back simply. Minimal jewelry, except for one piece. a diamond necklace that had been in the safety deposit box. Vintage, elegant, understated unless you knew what you were looking at. She didn't know its value. She just knew it had belonged to her grandmother, the woman her father's family had erased from their lives along with him. Wearing it felt right. "How do you feel?" Victor asked. Terrified, she admitted. "Good. That means you're paying attention." Guests started arriving. Maya watched from a private room with a one-way window that overlooked the main hall. She saw faces she recognized. People from her father's church, former co-workers, neighbors who'd known him for decades. And then she saw Marcus. He walked in with Isabel on his arm. She wore red, bold, confident, the kind of woman who walked into rooms expecting to be noticed. Marcus looked uncomfortable, not because of the event, but because he didn't understand why he'd been invited. He scanned the room, looking for Maya, probably. Didn't find her. Isabel pulled him toward the bar. They ordered drinks, smiled at people they didn't know, played the part of the successful couple. Maya felt her pulse in her throat. Victor appeared beside her. "You don't have to go out there yet. We can wait until after the program starts." "No," Maya said quietly. "I want to walk in like everyone else." "You sure?" She nodded. Because her father had taught her something important. Confidence isn't about feeling ready. It's about moving forward even when you're not. She left the private room, walked down a hallway, paused at the entrance to the main hall, took a breath, then stepped through the doors. The room didn't go silent immediately, but it shifted. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. People noticed, not because she'd made an entrance, but because she was visibly, undeniably pregnant and walking in alone. She saw recognition move through the crowd like a wave. Marcus saw her. His face went blank, then confused, then something closer to panic. Isabel leaned in, whispered something. He didn't respond, just stared. Maya didn't look at him. She walked calmly to a reserved seat near the front, sat down carefully, folded her hands in her lap, breathed. A woman she didn't recognize approached. Older, kind face. "You must be Maya," she said gently. "I am. Your father talked about you constantly. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you." The woman smiled. "He'd be so proud of you tonight." Maya's throat tightened. She managed a small nod. More people came over, offered condolences, said kind things about her father. And the entire time, across the room, Marcus sat frozen. Because he just realized something. This wasn't a random event. This was hers. And he had no idea what was coming. The lights dimmed. A microphone was placed at the center of the small stage. Victor stepped up first. "Good evening," he began. "Thank you all for being here. Tonight isn't just about launching a foundation. It's about honoring a man who lived his values every single day, even when no one was watching." He talked about her father, about his work, his kindness, his consistency. People nodded. A few wiped their eyes. Then Victor shifted. What most of you don't know is that James Richardson made a choice 34 years ago. He walked away from a life of wealth and privilege because he refused to compromise on love. He changed his name, started over, built a life based on character instead of inheritance. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Listening now, that choice cost him everything his family valued, Victor continued. But it gave him something far more important, integrity. And a daughter who inherited not his fortune, but his principles. Victor paused. Let the words settle. The Richardson Hartwell Foundation exists because James never forgot where he came from. And because he spent 30 years making sure his daughter would have the resources to build something meaningful, without the burden of expectation or entitlement. He gestured toward Maya. It's my honor to introduce the Foundation's founder and primary benefactor, Maya Richardson. Applause filled the room. Polite at first, then louder. Maya stood slowly, walked toward the stage, each step deliberate. She saw Marcus's face change in real time. Confusion became comprehension. Comprehension became horror, because he just connected the dots. Richardson Hartwell, her father's real name, the $50 million endowment, the foundation, her. Isabel looked at him, confused by his reaction. He didn't explain. He just sat there, watching the woman he'd left, 6 months pregnant, grieving, supposedly broken, walk onto a stage in front of 200 people who now understood something he hadn't. She wasn't a victim. She was a legacy. Maya reached the microphone, adjusted it slightly. The room went completely silent. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at the people who'd loved her father, who'd shown up tonight because they remembered his kindness. And she began to speak. Her voice was steady, not loud, not performative, just clear. My father taught me that the most important decisions we make are the ones nobody sees. She paused. Let that sit. He taught me that love isn't about convenience. It's about showing up, especially when it's hard, especially when no one's watching, especially when you have every reason to walk away. A few people nodded. He also taught me that wealth without character is just noise. That real power isn't about what you have. It's about what you do with it when no one's forcing you to do anything at all. She glanced down, took a breath. Most of you knew my father as a janitor, a maintenance worker, someone who showed up early and stayed late and never asked for recognition. She looked back up. What you didn't know is that he was born into one of the wealthiest families on the East Coast, that he was supposed to inherit an empire, that he gave it all up because the people who control that wealth told him love wasn't worth it. Gasps, whispers. He proved them wrong. Her voice didn't waver. He spent 34 years living proof that a good life isn't measured in assets. It's measured in integrity. And when he died, he left me something far more valuable than money. She paused. He left me a choice. The room was completely still. I could have kept this quiet. Could have taken what he built and disappeared. Nobody would have known. Nobody would have cared. She looked directly at the crowd now. But my father didn't hide his wealth because he was ashamed of it. He hid it because he wanted me to grow up knowing who I was before I knew what I had. She let that settle. And now that I know both, I'm choosing to do what he would have done. Build something that matters. Help people who've been underestimated. Support families that don't have safety nets. Victor placed a document on the podium beside her. The Richardson Hartwell Foundation has been endowed with an initial gift of $50 million, she said clearly, with a long-term structure designed to grow that into sustained generational impact. Applause started. She wasn't finished. That $50 million represents less than 1% of the total trust my father established in my name. The applause stopped. People looked at each other, trying to do the math. The full valuation, as of last quarter, is $5.2 billion. Complete silence. Not shocked silence. Reckoning silence. She didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Just stated it like the fact it was. I'm telling you this not to impress you, but to make something very clear. My father didn't raise me to be rich. He raised me to be responsible. And that's exactly what I intend to be. She stepped back from the microphone. The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was thunderous. People stood, clapped. Some cried. Maya walked off the stage calmly, returned to her seat, and across the room, Marcus sat completely still. His face had gone pale. His hands gripped the edge of the table. Isabel was saying something to him. He wasn't listening. He was doing math. The woman he'd left, thinking she had nothing, had just announced she controlled more wealth than he'd ever touch in 10 lifetimes. And he'd walked away, not because she wasn't enough, but because he'd never bothered to ask. If you've ever underestimated someone because they stayed quiet, this is where you sit with that discomfort. Subscribe if you believe loyalty and character still matter, because this story isn't over yet. Marcus tried to leave. The moment Maya stepped off the stage, he stood, grabbed Isabel's hand, muttered something about needing air. But Victor was faster, not blocking him, just present, standing near the exit with a calm, knowing expression that said everything without words. Marcus froze. Isabel looked confused. What's wrong? He didn't answer. Couldn't. Because what could he possibly say? That the woman he'd divorced 8 weeks ago, the one he'd left while she was grieving and pregnant, had just revealed herself to be one of the wealthiest people in the state? That he'd walked away from billions because he couldn't be bothered to stay through hardship? That every decision he'd made in the past 6 months had been based on a fundamentally wrong assumption about who had power? Isabel tugged his arm. Marcus, talk to me. He sat back down, mechanical, numb. Around them, people were celebrating, talking excitedly about the foundation, about Maya's composure, about her father's incredible story. Someone nearby said, "Can you imagine walking away from that much money just to marry someone you loved? That's rare." Another voice. And raising a daughter who turned out that grounded, even rarer. Marcus heard every word, each one a reminder of what he'd failed to be. He glanced toward Maya. She was surrounded now. People thanking her, hugging her, offering support. She looked tired but steady. She didn't look his direction once. Not out of spite, but because he simply didn't matter anymore. Isabel finally figured out. Wait, she said slowly. That's your ex-wife? He nodded. The one you said had nothing? He didn't respond. She pulled back slightly, stared at him. Marcus, how much did you know? Nothing, he said quietly. I knew nothing. You didn't ask? He looked at her, saw the shift happening in real time. The recalculation. She wasn't angry. She was evaluating, wondering if she'd made a mistake aligning herself with someone who'd miscalculated this badly. He saw it, felt it, and realized this was what Maya must have felt. Watching someone you trusted reassess your value based on new information. It was humiliating. I need to talk to her, he said suddenly. Don't, Isabel warned. I have to. Marcus, leave it alone. But he was already standing, moving toward Maya. Victor intercepted him smoothly, polite but firm. She's not available. I just need 5 minutes. She's not interested. Marcus's jaw tightened. You can't speak for her. I don't have to. She asked me to make sure you understood. There's nothing to discuss. The words hit like a door closing. Final. Permanent. Marcus stood there, useless, while the woman he'd underestimated continued conversations with people who actually mattered to her. He'd wanted closure, explanation, maybe even forgiveness. But Maya didn't owe him any of that, and she wasn't giving it. 10 minutes later, she left, quietly, through a side exit. No grand goodbye, just gone. Marcus watched her go, and understood, for the first time in his life, what it felt like to be completely irrelevant. Naomi Grace Richardson was born on a Thursday. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Dark hair. Her grandfather's eyes. Maya held her for the first time in a hospital room that felt both too quiet and exactly right. No husband. No family waiting in the hallway. Just Victor, who'd insisted on being there. And a nurse named Petra who stayed past her shift because she didn't think anyone should be alone for something this important. She's perfect, Petra whispered. Maya couldn't speak, just nodded, tears streaming, because her father should have been there, should have held his granddaughter, should have seen the life he'd protected finally arrive. But he wasn't, and somehow, Maya had to be enough for both of them. She looked down at Naomi, traced her tiny fingers, memorized her face. "Your grandfather loved you before you were born," she whispered, "and he made sure you'd grow up safe, protected, free." Naomi yawned. Impossibly small, impossibly whole. Victor stepped closer, looked at the baby with grandfatherly tenderness. "James would have been so proud," he said softly. "I know. You did good, Maya." She exhaled slowly. "I don't feel like I did anything except survive. That's more than most people manage." She stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Learned how to nurse, how to change diapers, how to function on 2 hours of sleep. Marcus sent flowers, generic ones, with a card that said, "Congratulations. Wishing you both well." She threw them away, not out of anger, but because they meant nothing. Empty gestures from someone who'd already chosen his distance. Isabel posted a photo on social media around the same time. Her and Marcus at brunch, smiling. Caption, "Choosing joy every day." Maya didn't bother looking at the comments. She had better things to focus on. When she brought Naomi home, the apartment felt different. Smaller, quieter, but also full in a way it hadn't been before. She set up the bassinet next to her bed, hung the mobile her father had bought months before he got sick, wooden animals he'd carved himself during late nights when sleep wouldn't come. She'd found them in his apartment after he died, wrapped carefully, a note attached for when she arrives. Now they hung above his granddaughter, spinning slowly, casting soft shadows. Maya sat in the rocking chair, held Naomi close, hummed a song her father used to sing when she couldn't sleep as a child. And for the first time since he died, she felt something close to peace. Not because the grief was gone, but because she finally understood what he'd been trying to teach her all along. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who you raise to carry it forward. The foundation grew faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, they'd funded scholarships for 40 students, opened a workforce training center, partnered with 3 local nonprofits to provide emergency assistance for single parents facing eviction or medical debt. Maya ran it quietly. No press tours, no ribbon-cutting ceremonies, no speeches unless absolutely necessary. She showed up, made decisions, signed checks that changed lives, and went home to her daughter. People started recognizing her, not as a celebrity, but as someone who'd actually done something. A woman approached her once in a grocery store, late 30s, tears in her eyes. "You paid my son's tuition," she said, voice breaking. "I don't know if you remember, but he's the first person in our family to go to college. And it's because of you." Maya smiled gently. "It's because of your son. He earned it." "No," the woman insisted. "It's because someone believed he was worth investing in." "Thank you." Moments like that happen often. Letters, emails, chance encounters with people whose lives had shifted because the foundation existed. Maya kept every letter. Read them on hard days when she questioned whether any of this mattered. It did. Not because of the money, but because of what the money made possible. Her father had been right. Wealth without purpose was just noise. But wealth used intentionally? That was legacy. By Naomi's first birthday, the foundation had expanded into 3 counties. Victor handled operations. Maya handled vision. And slowly, people stopped asking where the money came from. They just appreciated that it kept showing up. Marcus heard about it occasionally, through mutual acquaintances, through social media, through the quiet, persistent way Maya's name kept appearing in contexts that made him uncomfortable. He tried once to donate a check for $5,000, mailed directly to the foundation office. Victor sent it back. No explanation, just the uncashed check and a note. Declined. Marcus didn't try again. Isabel left him 14 months after the gala. Not dramatically, just practically. She'd realized what Maya had known all along. Marcus was the kind of man who traded up when he thought he'd found something better, and traded down the moment he realized he'd miscalculated. She wasn't interested in being the next person he underestimated. The divorce was quick, quiet. No one really noticed, because by then, Marcus had become what Maya predicted. Irrelevant. Not because she destroyed him, but because she'd simply moved forward without him. And in doing so, made him a footnote in a story that was never really about him to begin with. Marcus saw Naomi once. By accident. He was walking through a park near his office when he spotted them. Maya pushing a stroller. Naomi, maybe 18 months old, pointing at birds and babbling excitedly. Maya looked different, stronger, comfortable in a way she hadn't been when they were married. He almost walked over, almost said something, but Victor was there too, walking beside them, laughing at something Naomi had said, present in a way Marcus never had been. He stayed back, watched from a distance. Naomi had Maya's smile, her father's eyes. She looked healthy, happy, loved. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Not jealousy exactly, but recognition. He'd had the chance to be part of this, to be the man pushing the stroller, to hear his daughter laugh, to build something that mattered. And he'd chosen differently, not because Maya wasn't enough, but because he'd convinced himself she was too much work. He'd wanted easy, convenient, uncomplicated. What he got was empty. Isabel was gone. His reputation had taken quiet hits he didn't fully understand until people stopped returning calls. And the life he thought he was upgrading to felt thinner every year. Meanwhile, Maya had built something undeniable. Not loudly, not vengefully, just steadily. The foundation kept expanding. Her name kept appearing in contexts that mattered. Education panels, nonprofit boards, community planning committees. She didn't chase recognition. It found her anyway, because people respected competence. And she'd proven hers over and over. Marcus, by contrast, had stalled. His career plateaued. His relationships stayed surface level. His life felt like something he was performing rather than living. He thought about reaching out sometimes, sending an apology, trying to explain. But what would he even say? I'm sorry I left when things got hard. I'm sorry I didn't see your value. I'm sorry I was too arrogant to ask questions. None of it would change anything. Maya had moved on, completely, permanently, and he was left sitting with a lesson that arrived too late to be useful. You don't get credit for understanding your mistakes after the consequences are permanent. Years passed. Naomi started kindergarten. The foundation celebrated its 5th anniversary. Maya's name appeared in a business journal profile titled, "The Philanthropist You've Never Heard of." The article mentioned her father, the foundation, the work. It mentioned Marcus once. In passing, Richardson was previously married, but has been a single mother since her daughter's birth, choosing to focus on family and philanthropy rather than public relationships. One sentence, footnote territory. He read it twice, felt the sting, not because it was cruel, but because it was accurate. He'd been reduced to a detail, a phase, a person who'd been present briefly and exited before anything important happened. And the worst part? He deserved it. Maya stood in her father's old apartment one last time before the lease ended. It had been 6 years since his death. 6 years of building, growing, learning who she was when no one was watching. Naomi was with Victor for the afternoon, giving Maya space to close this chapter alone. She walked through rooms that felt smaller than they used to, ran her hand along the kitchen counter where her father had made thousands of meals, sat on the couch where he'd slept for 16 years so she could have the bedroom. The place was empty now, furniture donated, belongings sorted. All that remained were memories, and one envelope she'd been saving, the one Victor had held back until she was ready. She opened it carefully. Baby girl, if you're reading this, it means enough time has passed for you to understand what I'm about to say. Loss isn't punishment. It's permission. Permission to discover who you are when nobody's left to project their expectations onto you. Permission to build something that reflects your values instead of someone else's approval. Permission to walk away from people who can't see your worth. Not because you're angry, but because you're too busy building something better. You spent these years proving something I always knew. That character isn't about what you have. It's about what you do when you have everything. Some people will say you got lucky, that you inherited wealth and privilege and opportunity. Let them, because what they'll never understand is that wealth without wisdom is just money. And you had wisdom long before you had resources. I'm proud of you, not because you're successful, but because you stayed kind. You stayed grounded. You stayed you. That's the real inheritance. Love, Dad. She folded the letter carefully, tucked it back into the envelope, wiped her eyes. Then she locked the apartment door for the last time and walked out into late afternoon sun. Naomi was waiting at Victor's office, running toward her the moment she arrived. Mama, Maya scooped her up, held her tight. Did you have fun? We got ice cream. Of course you did, Maya said, smiling at Victor. He shrugged innocently. Grandpa privileges. They walked to the car together, Naomi chattering about her day, Victor asking questions that made her giggle. And as Maya buckled her daughter into the car's seat, this tiny person who'd never know her grandfather but would grow up surrounded by his values, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Gratitude, not for what she'd been given, but for what she'd been allowed to become. Because her father had been right. Loss wasn't the end. It was permission. Permission to choose who she wanted to be, without apology, without compromise, without needing anyone's validation. And she'd chosen well. If this story made you reflect on loyalty, patience, or responsibility, subscribing means you're choosing stories that make you better, not just entertain. Don't just watch. Learn.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.